my name is Sam. Thanks for checking out this video. Make sure if you get to the end and liked it, then hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification button, and give the video a thumbs up. I apologize if the lighting's not great. It's like hella overcast where I live today, so we're just gonna lean into it. Oh, also, this isn't my actual hair color. It's an in-between shade, so don't panic and be like, oh my god, why is your hair looking so bad? It's short term. First off, this week I read The Tiger at Midnight by Swati Teerdhala. If you don't remember when I got this book, it is freaking beautiful in person. There's lots of foils. I actually really like the chapter pages. They have this little like speckled dust on top. It's really, really pretty. It really went into it. Like, I remember I think I read the summary the first time. Like, when I heard about it, I was like, oh, that sounds cool. I want to read it. And then I found out she's coming to TBR Beyond group. And I was like, okay. Even more interested. Love meeting authors and reading their work. And it's debut work, and she's a woman of color. So like checks across the board on this one. So I went in it with really high hopes, actually, and it did not disappoint. I am floored at how little people, I mean, I know a lot of people just haven't read it yet. It's not a Sarah J. Maas release by any means, but this book was amazing. It follows this main character who's sort of an assassin, sort of like a street rat kind of combo, and she's sort of the assassin in this very politically charged climate between these two kingdoms, countries, rulers in what I believe is the Middle East, desert-y terrain. I don't know if that's actually, it's not like set in our world, but like that's where my brain went. I think especially because of like this all looks sandy to me. It is this amazing cat and mouse game between this girl who's just an assassin and the guy who is kind of potentially maybe taking over his uncle's role as like leader of the guard, and the guard's been doing some sketchy stuff, to say the least. But she thinks, well, not thinks, she was set up right at the beginning of the book, and she doesn't know who did it. So she spends this book, kind of keeps being caught by this kind of almost guard guy, and then they have this like, oh my god, sexual charged thing, and then she keeps managing to trick him and then sneaking up. It's actually kind of amazing. But when they do all this, there's none of that stupid like, you know, in like a lot of books where they're like, oh, and she met him and her heart fluttered, and like, and then they spend the whole book acting like Romeo and Juliet, like in Shakespearean times when it comes to like romance. No, they're like very into each other, and it's really obvious, and I love it. They do have those like, oh, I have feelings for this person, but then like they still, like she still will like continuously abandon him and leave him for her own gain. It's insane. I love, 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 love this whole book. So, I mean, like, I remember reading this when I first got it, but it's like, kill the general, evade his soldier. The killing the general is like the first thing that's done, where she's set up, find the assassin, and save the country is him. And it's, she's so freaking smart and sneaky, and I love her. And I can definitely see, it's not going to be a book for everyone, and by that I mean the pacing can definitely be an issue. There really isn't much of a climax, in my opinion, on this book. I still ended up loving this. I think I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars though. Just be aware though, it's not like a high plot wise. It seems like it's building up, and then book 2 is going to be maybe 2/3 or halfway through when there's a climax, and then the fallout is going to be the remainder of the trilogy, because it's set to be a trilogy. That's just full open sea. It's not doing like mini conflicts between each book and then finding an overall thing. It's this whole trilogy as an all overall plot. And conflict all at once, and it's trying to tackle it kind of bit by bit. The writing was good. The characters are just really likable. The setting was really interesting. There's lots of adventuring, so we do get to visit multiple different communities, and it really does not hastily set the stage for what is politically and socially going on in these communities that has resulted in this major conflict. So you're kind of put in the middle of like everything happening. I don't remember what the word is for that. There's a specific literary term for that. But as we go on and we enjoy these characters more and more in this whole cat and mouse game they got going on, you learn more about politically what's going on. And maybe the soldiers in this guard aren't exactly as moral as he thought they would be, and as he would hoped and had been brought up to be. And, oh, okay, so-and-so was actually lying. So there's a lot started here. There's not really much solved. I'm excited as heck for book 2. I have no idea when it comes out. I'm insanely impressed by this author. The writing was solid. Solid 5 stars. Thoroughly enjoyed this book. Then I finished, Crystal Crown by Elise Kova. This is the last book in the Air Awakened series. This was the one I was scared to read. Because everyone was like, I don't know, book 4 and 5 kind of sucked in the series. And I was like, oh, that's disappointing and kind of weird. I hardcore disagree with that. I don't understand what sucks. In this series, again, traditional YA fantasy, okay? It's just, I love the covers of this series, but I like that they're each book is an element, so like 3 is Earth's End, 4 is Water's Wrath, because that is a big premise of this world, is certain, if you're from a certain area, you generally are associated with a certain ability, if you have one. Everything that goes down at the end of Water's Wrath, but, you know, there's like a line drawn in the sand between, finally, her relationship and the prince that has the emotional maturity of a potato, as I've talked about before. There is actually in here, a full disclosure, just because it could be a trigger of, there is a miscarriage in here. Just be aware. I actually really, really liked this book. It kind of came full circle. It wasn't a risky ending by any means. It was, again, traditional YA fantasy, but that's what the series is. It's traditional YA fantasy. There's tropes used. We got the brothers, we got the backstabbing, we got the coming together with like a kind of ragtag group of people who have been abused to try and make your own kingdom and your own safe place. And I liked that we got to do a bit more traveling outside of the norm places in this book, and that we see like Daniel kind of find closure. I enjoyed this book, actually. I think Air Awakens of the series is still my favorite, Air Awakens and Fire Falling, but I enjoyed this. I think I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. It made sense. Like, I know I'll get dragged in this by my friend Melanie, but like, we've talked about the whole, like, she should have picked the Darkling at the end of Shadow and Bone, and I'm like, I get wanting to be with Darkling. Sure, he's got that sex appeal. Also, he is high-key manipulative and evil, but sure, he has that sex appeal. But Mal makes sense. Okay, like, to the rest of the story. He's there at the beginning and also gives this full circle thing. And I just feel like Mal would have been a pointless character, too, if she had ended up with a dark. Anyways, that aside, this makes sense, okay? So if you're one of those people who were like, oh, I don't know what to do, this makes sense. I also have it signed now because I went to the Elise Kova signing. I'm really excited now. I'm going to try and get to Vortex. The first one's Vortex Vision or Chosen Champions? I picked up the one that was out in paperback. I think it's Vortex Visions, which is the spin-off. I don't want to say what character because then that gives away how this sounds. But I'm really excited to read that one when I get a chance. And Elise Kova's really nice and really, really sweet. And I really recommend this series. It's like a really well done self-publication. And if you haven't read it, the Loom Saga is her series but done traditional publishing. Freaking read that series. It's steampunk and it's so sexy and it's so good. And like, also, just get into her as an author. She doesn't make you wait 4 years between books. Look at you, Samantha Shannon and George R. R. Martin. She literally released the series, I think, within like 16 months total or something like that. The Loom Saga came out in like a total of 2 years. It was... Oh, it's just... Then I read White Rose by Kip Wilson, actually in one sitting. It is my first book I've ever written, or not written, first book I have ever read in verse. And if you don't know, there was a thing in World War II called the White Rose Resistance, and it was very short-lived and very small, but it was a group of people who were privileged in the Nazi state. They weren't, for the most part, Aryan, but they were natural-born Germans, not Jewish. They didn't have any physical disabilities. No one was openly gay. The only thing that they kind of had going against them was that they were politically not really jiving with what Hitler was putting down, okay? So there are 2 siblings, Hans and Sophie Scholl. They end up, spoiler, getting beheaded after a mock trial. They went to a university and started throwing up pamphlets saying, like, this is what's going on, there's people going missing, this is what Hitler's doing, we just sent all these people to the Eastern Front on a battle we knew we were going to lose, and he killed all of your citizens. Why is he supposed to be a hero for us? And the janitor at the school saw them and arrested them, and they were put up for trial. And, well, trial using the loose word. They stood in front of a, I'm going to assume, cis straight white guy who was a racist and was like, no, you're dead, you're guilty, and killed Hans, Sophie, and their friend Christopher, I think was in that. And then later on, a few people who were still part of the White Rose Resistance tried to keep passing on their message. They got caught, and most of them were killed as well. So this was one of the rare documented instances of like a coordinated effort inside Germany during the Nazi occupation of people trying to take it down from within. And their citizens, they weren't, well, a couple of them were military, but it's just, it's interesting. It's not really talked about a lot. We get a lot of Holocaust survivors and victims that were in the concentration camps, which is I'm happy that we did get that documentation before so many of them did pass away. And like things like Night by Eli Wiesel, that's an important book. But I think we, especially with the current time period with racism and xenophobia and this mass ridiculousness of them versus us mentality going on in a certain country which shall not be named, and then they're like the restricting of women's bodies. Yeah, we'll get into that. Anyways, I think this is important to remember that, like, just because you are not the one being targeted, but you know it's wrong, that doesn't mean you don't do anything. If you see something wrong, do something. You have that position of privilege to do something. And I think the author's note really kind of touched on this, and I think that's something I wish I think of Sophie as a heroine. She was young, like in university, 21 or 22, and she was just like, something's wrong. Like, none of this is okay. Why am I supposed to think this is okay? I don't agree with what he's doing. I don't agree with war. I don't agree with this violence. I'm going to do something about it. And we are luckily, kind of, hopefully, in a time period that in the first world countries, you can do that without being guillotined. So think about that. And I think we want to think of, like, women that we want to idolize. I think she's someone that we should. It's just this sort of plot, and it switches back and forth a little bit between points of view, but it's mostly Sophie as she kind of goes through adolescence. She has her first boyfriend. People start going off to war. Her brothers get arrested for being a little bit more liberal leaning, shall we say, while they're in and out of the military. And then she goes with her brother to university, and she, the whole time, is just kind of questioning and challenging everything she's been taught. Her boyfriend also works for the Nazis within the government, which is an interesting kind of pitch, but he sort of knows what's going on with her. And he does sort of help her. And there's just this really lovely quote at the beginning of the book on page 9 of the arc anyways. And I think it kind of perfectly describes who she was. I might not be the best behaved girl. I don't want to be the prettiest girl. But I most decidedly will be the smartest girl. And I feel like that's something that we need to remember, especially when we're raising girls, to think of who they want to idolize themselves after, is people who stand up for things like that. So it's a wonderful book. It's really, really good. If you don't know anything about them, it's actually probably a good starter. If you do know stuff about them and you're just like, oh wow, I've never read a book with them in it, it's also a good one for you. And I hope to eventually pick up a finished copy. I really, really like this cover as well. I think it does a good job of, I think the title too is perfect. White Rose is just a good title. And then having her on the rose and then the fighter jets there. And it's not a super dark World War II book, which I know is something that a lot of people struggle with. Is like Night by Eli Wiesel is insane, and it's so succinct and simple, but it's dark. Like, it's only like, what is it, 170 pages or something like that, but it's dark and can be really depressing and a lot to intake. This is a good other option if you still want to try and get into that, but not want to feel just exhausted and hate humans. So yeah, this book, solid 5 out of 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed it, and I'd recommend it. Then I read probably one of the weirdest books I've read in a really long time, called The Royal Art of Poisoning by Eleanor Herman. I know I've missaid the title a couple times, but it is The Royal Art of Poison. It is a nonfiction. It was my nonfiction read for the month, but it goes through all of these just weird things that especially royals used to do when it came to poisoning and trying to counteract poisons, and a little bit of the medical aspect of it. I had no idea. Apparently, royals spent elaborate amounts of money buying unicorn horns that were found rarely all over the place, and apparently in the northern part of Canada, which they just realized now, like, it was just like a sea animal's tusk, basically. But they thought if you dipped the unicorn horn, because remember, we believe in unicorns in the 1400s, they dipped unicorn horns thinking that would counteract any, like, poisons in the wine or anything like that. Like, they spent peasant tax dollars buying unicorn horns. There is just a lot of really, really interesting cases. They take these characters that are, some are well known, some of them are not well known, and are like, okay, was he poisoned? And do a modern autopsy on this person. And some of them, they've done physical autopsies on them, not Eleanor Herman themselves, but scientists. However, and it talks about this in the book as well, the British monarchy won't allow anyone to do that anymore. And they now, it's basically because they know the line of succession has been broken at this point. And that was, they found that out for sure when they found Richard III, was it? In the, like, in a parking lot when they were doing construction, because it was a public land, they couldn't say no. And so they did that, and they realized, like, there was a break in the line. He wasn't right in line for the throne, but he ended up becoming throne, and he does not connect to Elizabeth Windsor. So there's a break in the line, which obviously would bring up, like, questions of the institution of the monarchy, which I sort of get. But it's really interesting when they're able to go back and be like, oh no, she definitely was murdered, because we can look, like, even 300 years later, her bones are, like, leaking radium because of the mixtures of, like, poisons that people were given, accidental sometimes, intentional other times, as well as, like, the mixture of basic chemicals that we now deem, like, super don't touch, that is poison. They put it in their makeup, and, like, they mixed it in with, you know, soap and all these different things to clean, and or some of them, they're like, oh, it cures, like, this cut on your leg, and you're like, okay, it healed the cut on my leg, but you just inserted, like, chemicals into my bloodstream now, and I'm gonna die of blood poisoning. But they couldn't figure this all out. It's insane. The autopsies are really, really interesting. They're not super tense. It's very layman's terms. And then at the last section, I just kind of started giggling hysterically. So there's a last section on 25 called Modern Medicine, and it's like just like more modern uses of poisons or existing. And it's literally just like, I think it's like 5 stories of like Putin being like Putin, like being the guy that we all know when he's a world leader of, like, he kills off his political enemies or people he don't like, or he sends them elsewhere. It's just insane to me, like, the levels of, like, blatant poisoning that are going on with Russia now, and then Russia's like, nope, we didn't do it, and they're like, you're holding a bottle of poison, and I'm like, no, I'm not. I don't know what you're talking about. So it was really, really, really interesting. It's really enjoyable, and they're, like, sort of like mini stories, because we go over each, like, person. And it's just really fascinating and interesting if you're looking for a nonfiction. It's not long, and it's enjoyable. Really, really enjoyable. Then I read The Train to Impossible Places by P.G. Bell. I thought this was a standalone, but I guess it's going to be a series. There's supposed to be another book coming out later this year. But it follows our main character, which, first of all, shout out, it's a girl of color. She is in her living, or wakes up hearing, like, banging in her living room, and there's trolls building a train track through her house. And it's this train to, like, parallel universes, magical places. She hops on it when she's not supposed to, and goes on all this wild ride. And this world that she goes into is having some political issues. There's basically, like, 2 kind of polar capitals that were set up for good reasons in the past, but they've started to be manipulated by people for bad reasons. So there's conflicting there, and she kind of steps in to try and fix things. And it's really, really cute and enjoyable. I really liked it. You can see the kind of cast of characters. At one point she works for the postal service in the train. That's what the train is. And she goes to, like, a place to drop off or pick up mail. And it's like, it's in the middle of, like, the ocean, basically. And it's like this ship full of crew that died, like sailing, or, like, stuck there as ghosts. And she just goes and meets them. That's why they're there. It's really, really cute. The ending twist surprised me, to be totally honest. I was not totally expecting where that went. I wasn't sure who was good and who was bad for the whole time. There's a decent amount of people lying to each other and being called out for it, which is great. And yeah, it was just so freaking adorable. I really, really enjoyed this. 4 out of 5 stars. And lastly, this week, I read Scion of the Fox by S.M. Beko. I thought it was Bieko. Apparently it's Beko. This is book 1 in the Realms of Ancient series. I have book 2 as a finished copy signed because she was at a conference thing that I was at. So I figured I'd finally pick up and read this one. So it follows our main character, who's this girl whose parents have passed away. She's living with her aunt and her uncle. She lives in Winnipeg, and she has, one of her eyes is kind of messed up, so she has an eye patch on it. And one morning, after having this really weird dream about this fox, she wakes up and, like, her eye is fixed, and everything starts going haywire from there. I don't know how I felt about this book, to be totally honest. It's not bad. Yeah, it's not bad. I just have several questions, and none of them were answered. So the main character is Roan, but it's set in Winnipeg. I'm even someone from Canada. I could not imagine Winnipeg if you paid me. I've never been there. It's a place that I literally never think of visiting or imagining in my brain. So I think I struggled with this. I think my thing is, like, when you place a book in a modern setting, in a or like just a real world setting, if you're not going to make it somewhere really well known, like New York or Paris, you need to tell me about this place. You can't just assume I know about Winnipeg. I don't. I'm Canadian, and I don't. I know that it exists in Manitoba. That's it. I know that from work experience that's got a high Indigenous population. and that there used to be Métis settlement in and around that area. That's literally all I know. I could not tell you the streets or anything like that. And I think this is what really, really struggled with this book, that it just kind of expected you or threw in these little tidbits, but it didn't actually show me, like, this is Winnipeg. And I struggled with that. I like the characters. There's a lot of, like, a lot of growth and learning that they go through for sure. There's some weird things, though, like, her uncle kind of, like, tries to kill her a couple times, but, like, she's very blasé about it, which was a little weird to me. There is a high Indigenous population in Winnipeg area. I'm wondering, because there's a lot of animals and spirits, if some of this, the basis was taken from some of the local cultures. I don't know enough about the local cultures to know that. It's never really explained anywhere. They use a lot of, like, Indigenous landmarks, like the Assiniboine River. But if it's not, I don't understand why it's set in Winnipeg, to be totally honest. It could be set in any other city at this point. Why pick a really obscure city in Canada that literally, I don't even know what their population is, but, like, literally no one can think, like, I don't know a person from Winnipeg, let alone have I ever visited it. I could Google it, I guess, but, like, it was just a weird choice for me. So I'm hoping it is from some spirituality from that local community. If so, great. We need more of that stuff. If not, I don't understand why Winnipeg. I think I also mentally, like, wandered off a couple times plot-wise. Some of the characters, they're not, the characters themselves aren't necessarily boring. They just aren't super memorable, I don't think. And I'm just, I don't know. I'm kind of struggling with what to rate it. I just don't understand the choice of Winnipeg. That, like, literally, and why, and then not actually showing. If you're going to pick a city that's not, like, really ever written in, or set a book in, absolutely, Winnipeg's a good one. You need to paint me the picture, though. You need to tell me, you need to explain to me why you would think Winnipeg. Like, this needs to be in Winnipeg. And I didn't get that from this. So, I don't know what to rate this book at this point. It's not bad. It's just an urban fantasy, which I wasn't totally expecting. I was expecting more of just, like, a traditional fantasy, but I think I will read book 2 because I do have it, and yeah, we'll see. If you know, I doubt this will happen because I have very few viewers, and, you know, not a ton of people have read this book. If you know any of the answers to my questions, please let me know in the comment section down below. I would really appreciate it. So those are all the books that I finished this week. I also started Let's Call It a Doomsday by Katie Henry as an arc, but I'm still working on that one. So that will probably come next week in the next video. That is all for today. I will see you all on Tuesday. Make sure to check the description box down below. I will link all of these books to their Goodreads pages, and I will also link all of my social media. If you follow me, I will follow you back.